today I'm just spending some time just recapping what I've done over the past few weeks. It's been a rough few weeks. This disease, when you're regressing it, when you're actually fighting it, is painful. So let me just give this a bit of context. I was diagnosed about a month ago with metastatic tumoral pseudogout, which is a similar disease mechanism to metastatic cancer once it's spread through the body. But these tumors don't behave like a malignancy, and the definition of that malignancy is where it's spreading, but it has no regard for your organ boundaries. So a cancer that spreads through the body that's metastatic, it's stage 4 and it's spreading everywhere, can move through the organ boundaries as it divides and divides and crowds out cells and suffocates them. And the tumors in my body behave similar with non-malignancy, but that doesn't mean they're benign. It actually means that it's not dividing, it's clumping and mummifying like Rockwool. So the cells that are behaving badly can't stop themselves from spinning these Rockwool filaments, and while it's in the growth phase and you're not fighting the disease, so while it's growing but blindly, and the cells that are out of control are sitting in your fatty tissues and your fascia tissue, and they're spinning these filaments of Rockwool into your fatty cells, fatty deposits, which become like pillows of Rockwool. So your body doesn't feel this happening. There are signs that it's happening, but you grow them blindly. So by the time it's kind of metastasized and spread throughout your body and you're starting to get symptoms, it's already made progress. So then, when my doctor's finally given me the diagnosis, I'm like, I can't let this happen. I'm already one step ahead of him. I've been fighting it for some time because I let these tumors grow over a period of years. They're kind of slow growing, but they have aggressive phases. And my job was to figure out a way of regressing them, and that was a journey of discovery. I realized that I could actually regress them, but the process of regressing them is extremely painful, and I have to modulate how much pain I can tolerate. So this morning, as an example, typical morning, I have sleepless nights because of the blood imbalance. So my white blood cell count is really off. It behaves a bit like leukemia, which means that I suffer with night sweats where my body is trying to heal and send blood around to the different places that it has to oxygenate, but my heart has to work harder to do it because the white blood cell count is way off. So I end up with these incredible night sweats that pool on my body, and you can't sleep through that. So I have a bath at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I actually managed to wash my hair. I managed to look after my hair like once every 3 days, and I'm talking about I brush it every 3 days because I can't find the energy to do it more often or take care of myself. And then I come back to bed and I crash because of the exhaustion of taking a bath at 8 a.m. I'd love to start my day just like a normal person, but it just kind of takes it out of me. Having your head back and trying to wash your hair and all the strain, don't know, it's just really draining. So then I come back to bed and I'm woken up at 11 a.m. by the phone from my insurance case manager because I'm considered a complex case. So every time I go to the doctor and they want update scans or anything, the insurance has a bit of overreach and they step in and they say, no, we're not going to pay for that. We deny it. And then my case manager has to step in and get them to reauthorize it. Meanwhile, I've lost my scan, which is taking place in June, which means that once I've got this reauthorized, by the time I get the scans that I need to map all the tumors in my body, it's going to be August. So we're going to be in the next, it's going to be like in the next phase of my medical leave. You know, so 6 months into my medical leave, I'm finally getting the spread of my tumors validated. So the doctors have palpated my tumors, they know they exist. And even when they want a scan, the insurance company steps in and denies it. Like, that is how messed up with overreach. Now, this decision is made by non-medical people who say I don't need a scan. That's kind of crazy. So either way, I'm going to go through this process of submitting forms to the State Department to complain about insurance overreach on my case, because this is medical care that I need, and it's just disgusting to me how insurance people with no clinical background are denying the treatment that I need. And that's typical, that's normal in America. They want to deny scans at every opportunity because in Britain it works the opposite. If you're suspicious of something, they do a body scan. And then they know where to target the biopsies. In America, they want to avoid scans at all costs because it's probably because there is literally an obesity epidemic, and if you're scanning people, like, there is just too much going on in the body for the radiologist to say, well, there's the focus of the problem because it's systemic. So why have a scan if you're just going to confuse the radiologist because there's just too much going on? And the scans in the US are about $2,000 a pop, and mine is a double scan. I'm having the torso scan, and the radiation, the dye that they put in, doesn't last long enough for them to scan the whole body, so I have to have it broken up into 2 scans, at least 24 hours apart, because you can't have 2 shots of radiation in one day. So I have to have these 2 scans at least 24 hours apart. So we're looking at a $4,000 scan to map these tumors in my body. And when I called the MRI to book the appointment, which my doctor had asked for, and it was initially authorized by the insurance, the MRI location was like, oh no, you can't have it done here because you're a high-risk case. You have a history of seizures, so you need to have it done at a hospital. And that's the issue that the insurance company has a problem with. They don't want me to have the scans at a hospital because to them, it's more administrative cost. It's another layer of administration cost that they don't want to pay for. So they denied my MRI scan on the basis of have it at an outside location where it's cheaper, where you actually have all the C-grade students who are not working with the doctors, who look at the scans, and they don't necessarily pick everything up, which is the problem from my previous MRI scan. So in my previous MRI scan back at Christmas, I had it done at a non-hospital location, and my oncologist looked at those scans. The radiology report was like, everything's perfect, organ boundaries, muscle boundaries, everything's good, nothing remarkable here, nothing to see, everything looks good. And my oncologist is looking at that saying that radiology report is bogus, because the tumors are there, they exist, but they're not invading the boundaries of the organs, which is why the radiologist just didn't pick up on it, because this disease is so rare. They are probably not trained to look at those fluffy clouds related to tophaceous pseudogout, which is a form of crystallization, mineralization, tumors that mineralize in the fatty tissues. So they're not normal tumors. So it's kind of crazy to me how I'm trying to fight this disease, and on top of fighting this disease, I have this extra layer of navigating the broken medical industry to get myself the help that I need. Which means that my mindset is no longer geared to relying on the medical industry, because they're not helping me. I've just realized that the background to my live stream today, I'm just sitting on the floor where I normally sleep. This is my sleeping space, right? On the floor in the middle of the room, so that I don't have to move very far. If I have to get up and crawl off the floor, it's very hard for me to get up sometimes when my muscles don't want to work. So I just kind of roll off, and then I toddler climb up the furniture, either side. That's how I move around. And on good days, I have mobility to get around the house, and I can kind of loll up to the toilet if I need to go, if I'm having an urgent rush to go to the bathroom. My knees are all kind of broken up and grazed and cut and bruised, because it's really hard to get off the floor sometimes. This disease is extremely painful when you are fighting it, because it grows blindly. It grows in the spaces that your body can't see. It fills them up, it takes them up, and you don't notice as time goes by, and as the months go by, and as the years go by, you just notice that yes, there's some weight gain, and yes, there's a lot of swelling, but gradually you start realizing that you're freezing up, you can't move as well, and your walking changes. You start limping, and you can't work out why you're limping. It's just that sometimes you can't communicate with your leg, and then you lose trust that you can walk, so you start to shuffle rather than pick your feet up, because you don't know when the leg is going to switch off, so you have to be ready to catch yourself to fall. You sort of brace yourself while you're walking in case you do fall. Things like walking downstairs becomes impossible, because you just don't trust that your leg is going to take your weight moving forward, so you have to turn around and walk down the steps backwards. So that's when you first notice there's something really wrong. And you go see an orthopedist, and the orthopedist is like, there's nothing wrong with you. And there are so many ways that they can miss this disease. It makes it very hard to diagnose. But then when you actually start to fight the disease back, it becomes more and more painful. You become more and more disabled. And The disability is intermittent, and that is what confuses people, because I can look pretty healthy and normal, and that's very misleading, because I'll go on the bus with my disability scooter and it's got terrible turning radius on it. It's like the turning radius of a British roundabout. So I'm always making excuses to the bus driver and saying, I got this, I can Flintstone it. So I put my feet down and I yank the handlebars and then I yank the bum and I turn it around. I'm literally Flintstoning my electric scooter onto the bus. And so that's kind of weird, because they'll look at me like, you've got a disability scooter, we can't say anything, it's official, you're disabled, but how come you're so strong that you can lift this thing up and Flintstone it? It's really awkward, embarrassing. And I just say to the bus driver every time, I don't know when my nerves are going to switch off, I don't know when I'm going to fall, so I have to use the scooter, which is true. I can't walk very far without, I mean, it used to be that I used to go to work and I could walk 10,000 steps a day, but at some point during that day, I just make one wrong move, like a muscle in its most extended position where I'm putting force on it. So for example, a hill walk. So your psoas muscle when you hill walk is fully extended behind you and it's maintaining a lot of tension. And that is the point when the tumors abrade it like a pumice stone. And when that pumice stone tumor rubs my psoas muscle, the psoas muscle switches off and I fall. And I don't know when it's going to happen, but so these tumors in my belly, they feel like abrasive Rockwool pumice stone pillows. Initially, they feel like pillows. They're kind of smooth surface. But then as you go through some fasting or you digest some of that fat, that's the tumors are made of fatty tissue that become mineralized. So as your body consumes that fat, and your fat gets laid down after you eat, 20 minutes after you eat, your insulin levels rise and your body converts as much of it can into fat to burn later. And then after 8 hours of not eating, that fat starts to break down and go back into the body on slow release, which means that these fatty pillows that are mineralized start to pit away and corrode back, leaving these spiny edges of the tumors. They're kind of spiny and they feel more abrasive. So as you regress the fatty content of the tumors, it exposes the spiny, coral-like, sharp edges of the tumors, which cut into your nerves, irritate your nerves, and cause a bleeding out of the synapsing that you are trying to maintain with your muscles. And that process is painful. It's like neuropathic pain coupled with neuropathic inflammation. So when your nerves get injured like this, there is a domino effect of the nerves having been scraped and irritated, and inflammation is, the inflammatory process has started. But these nerves, these motor neurons, are connected to your CNS, and they're connected to your spinal cord and to your brain. And what happens when your nerves are injured? Your brain feels it. The inflammation process starts, and now you have inflammation in your brain. So usually within 24 hours, you will feel incredibly fatigued, because your brain is shutting down and going into repair mode. It needs to repair, it needs to fight this. It's starting an inflammatory process, and that inflammatory process needs to be cleaned out of the brain. So you need to sleep. The CEO of your brain is going, oh, we need to shut you down. You need to heal. You've had a nerve injury. You need to heal. And that is why neurological diseases come with so much chronic fatigue, because your nerves are under attack and your brain feels it and it wants to shut you down so that it can go into repair mode. Unfortunately, the sleep cycle is kind of messed up because you've got all these other symptoms related to the pain, all these other symptoms related to malnourishment of the blood, if you like, because the blood is out of balance. There's too much white blood cell. So it's behaving like a leukemia, it's behaving like a blood cancer. And the doctors will tell you, oh, we don't truly understand this disease yet. Because they're kind of missing the mark. And because I understand this disease, I've been living with it for so long now, I figured out how it behaves. I know its metabolism, and I know to fight this disease, I have to train my metabolism. And that's what I've been doing, and I've been doing it using modulation of my fasting. I have to figure out when it's safe for me to start regressing tumors, because that process is painful and it will give me chronic fatigue. It will shut my brain down. And also my energy levels. And this is something I have trouble with describing, so I'm going to draw it. In actual fact, I'm going to draw what energy levels look like when you are chronically ill, to help people understand the concept. Right, so where shall I start? When I was, when the diagnostic journey started back in Christmas 2024, so 4 months ago, the diagnostic journey started because there was so much going on systemically. I was going through rapid, sudden weight loss, and it was scary for people around me because I lost 30 pounds in 6 weeks. I couldn't eat. Any food going into my stomach just felt like it was getting stuck, and it couldn't be digested, it couldn't go down. There was a tearing sensation and a fullness in my stomach, and I had a sense that whatever was growing in me was mummifying my stomach and stopping the movement and natural gastrophysics to process and digest my food. So I knew something was very, very bad. And the crazy thing is, to me, is that I was completely on my own with this. The doctors weren't helping. There was nothing to help with these symptoms. I can't remember if they gave me kind of painkillers or what. But I saw the doctor again in about a month because I was just suffering so bad with being unable to eat. And I wanted to know if there was anything they could do. And I think I made a video at the time of when to go into hospital, because my husband was just convinced that if I couldn't eat, like, I had weeks to live. and he wanted me to go into hospital to make sure that I could be fed through a tube or something like that. Now, I had to get educated through that process, and what that meant was I decided to look at videos of that transition, when to go into hospital. And you really ought to stay out of ICU. You don't want to be in ICU because they'll keep you alive, but it's the most unpleasant way. It's a bad way to die. So I started researching what are the conditions that I would end up in hospice, because at least if I'm going to die, I'm going to be comfortable, right? So I had to face that mortality straight on to get rid of the fear and anxiety of dealing with potential mortality, because now I was at a point where I could not eat. And if I couldn't eat, how long do I have left? And that's where I was in January. I think January was the most difficult month I had to deal with this disease, because it had grown, it had piled up in my body like coral and creeped its way up my organs, mummifying everything and constricting and stopping things from moving to the point where I was no longer able to digest my food and extract nutrients from it. So this was all dysfunctional. And I was like, there has to be something I can do. So I took a real chance, and I started attacking the tumors head on as much as I could do, and it was painful. I started using the Jacuzzi Baffle here to see if I could vibrate and use infrasound to jiggle it about and aggravate the mummification, the tearing sensation. So, as an example, if I drank something extremely cold, that would usually set it off, or extremely hot, that would set it off, because your healthy tissue is very stretchy and sinuous, and the tumors that were growing in me were not. They kind of felt clumpy, and they would tear easily. They were very friable. They felt like the inside content of a cyst, you know, like when you see the cyst popping videos that Dr. Sandra Lee does, and she's like dissecting things and then pushing it out, and it all comes out like this stuff. It felt like that. It felt like I literally had this kind of just weird material that could easily tear. And if I shocked my stomach with a hot drink or a cold drink, then I would literally feel this tearing sensation in my stomach, which was agonizing. I didn't know then what it was. But that tearing sensation is literally the tumors, like an abrasive paste, scraping away at the fascia tissue and the boundaries everywhere where the nerves are cargo net around your organs, everywhere your nerves move. And your organs should be able to jiggle around freely and move, and the nerves connected to those organs move with it, right? But when you've got this paste, pumice stone, rockwool type tumoral growth wrapping around everything, what it does is it behaves like carbide paste, and it just causes so much pain and tearing around the organs that you literally feel like your organs are tearing. So I could feel it, and it was just doubling me over in agony. And so I knew what this felt like, and I started to look for videos on YouTube to help me stay focused on, if this was the end, how to die peacefully. So I found Hospice Nurse Julie on YouTube, and she was extremely helpful. And the first video I found of Hospice Nurse Julie really validated me, what I was going through. And the first video I found was the worst symptom she has to deal with. And she was breaking down. She was crying. She was like, this is... When she sees people dying and suffering and going, there is no need to suffer that bad when you are dying. So what makes this symptom so bad? And she said, when people are close to dying, there's a couple of things that happen. It can go a couple of different ways. So usually there is a tumor around the upper GI that can't be operated on because it's not a finite mass that can just be removed. It's kind of all tangled up like meatballs and spaghetti in your upper GI. So they can't just operate on it. And this is the cause of the worst symptoms that she has to deal with as a hospice nurse. Because when you can't ingest food, or you can, but only a little bit, and the stomach causes pain and fullness, and then you want to vomit, but the vomit can cause more tearing sensations and more pain. So usually in the end stages of cancer or metastatic tumoral growth that's affecting this stomach area, you've got uncontrollable vomiting, uncontrollable nausea, and a lot of pain. And she usually associates it with around 2 weeks left to live. So I was of the perspective that I was in this critical zone of just a few weeks left. And I watched her videos, and she said, what makes this one of the most tragic symptoms to deal with as a hospice nurse is if people who are suffering don't need to suffer, but they have opted to do everything holistic and say, I'm only going to do herbal medicines, and, you know, I'm not going to do any of the pain relief or anything like that. So they end up watching these people suffer, vomiting and being permanently nauseous while they waste away. And she said it's just the worst death that she has to watch. So she said the relief that they can provide is, I can't remember the name of it, but what they do is they insert a feeding tube through the nose, but it's not for feeding. It's for evacuating the stomach, because when you've got all this pain and nausea, there's a fullness sensation in the stomach. So to relieve it, they suck all the food out through the nose. They suck the stomach out. So you're not using a feeding tube for eating, you're using it to relieve yourself of these symptoms. And that's when I realized all this BS, you need to go into hospital, you need to get food in you. No, I don't. I'm gonna fast. I'm gonna go without food for a bit until these tumors starve and weaken, and maybe I can destroy them. Because if they can't be operated on, because that is the area that they can't, there is no clear boundary, so they can't just scrape everything away, because they'll be scraping away your nerve tissue. So I was like, no, that, you know, don't say to someone, you need to get food in you when it is too painful to eat. It's really dismissive. It's really hurtful. You need to be in hospital because you can't eat. No. In actual fact, you can go without food for a few days and you'll be okay. There are certain metabolics that you need to look after. So metabolics of the immune system that you need to look after and you need to recharge. But you don't need to eat much to trigger those processes. So throughout the month of January, I focused on fasting, mainly out of intuition, mainly because eating only a small amount of food would set the pain off. So I started following hospice nurse Julie from that point because I felt validated that the tumoral growth had spread. It started in my pelvic bowl and it grew up towards my stomach, and now it was touching some places, which was making it difficult for me to process food. So my intuition was to just stop eating as much as possible, and if I ate, to only do it within a small window of the day so that I could spend the rest of the day in as minimum pain as possible to do with eating. So this happened, and over a period of 6 weeks, I lost 30 pounds, not by intent, but purely because I just couldn't eat. I couldn't get nutrition into my body. And then I watched a YouTube video by hospice nurse Julie, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and it really hit the nail on the head for me. She said, there was a video and it was titled something like, what is the difference between chronic illness and acute illness when someone ends up in hospice? So how do people die if you are chronically ill versus acutely ill? And that was like, immediately the title got to me, because when you're first diagnosed with any chronic illness, the doctor will tell you, oh, don't worry, it's not going to kill you. And they say that for a couple of reasons. The first reason is the mechanics of a single disease on its own won't kill you. So, for example, if I have MCAS, which I've been diagnosed with, it's currently quiescent, which means that it's currently quiet. MCAS can't kill me until the conjunction of another comorbid illness comes into alignment and stops an organ from sustaining life. So, for example, the tumors in my body that were growing up inside me supposedly can't kill me unless my stomach is unable to move and process food. That's a life-sustaining organ. So if I can't eat, I'm gonna die, right? So I was like, I have to free my stomach, or I'm gonna end up in hospice where every time I eat and I go through all this pain, they're gonna suck the food out of my stomach to relieve my pain. And that isn't fighting back the tumor, that is just allowing it to be there, allowing it to just gradually mummify the stomach, stop it from moving, and relieving my symptoms of pain and discomfort and nausea and vomiting by sucking the food out of my stomach that I tried to nourish myself with. And this is usually what they expect in the last 2 weeks of life. And I thought, so when the doctor says to me, don't worry, this chronic illness isn't going to kill you, I felt extremely pissed. I was like, how dare you dismiss what I'm going through? Because this is extremely painful. This disease of the tumors growing is extremely painful, and I felt dismissed. So I was glad that I had a diagnosis. At that point, I didn't have a diagnosis. They knew they were onto something. They knew they had to find something there. There was a reason for this mummification of my stomach, but they didn't know if it was a sarcoma or some form of colorectal cancer. They were looking at cancer. They weren't looking for this disease. And eventually everything came back negative. And he looked at the scans, and then he palpated the tumors, and he was like, okay, so I'm diagnosing you with this because it's consistent with these skin effusions that are coming out, these extrusions of calcium crystals that are coming out of your nose, your skull, your jaw. So it's consistent. The differential diagnosis he's able to give me based on a whole myriad of different symptoms. And then there's the statement, don't worry, it's not going to kill you, which feels extremely dismissive to a chronically ill person who knows that the conjugation of two symptoms coming together from two different comorbidities can still kill you. And what hospice nurse Julie did in one of her YouTube videos was explain, this is the difference between how a chronically ill person dies compared to an acutely ill person dies. And that to me was an absolute bombshell. That was brilliant. So I'll just describe for you why that's important now, because it might give some of you hope. So she says, the interesting thing is, chronically ill people come into hospice to die, just like acutely ill people, and they have the same symptoms. And the main difference is, chronically ill people die the most quietly. They just go. But the acutely ill person dies with terrible symptomatic struggle and pain. They've both got the same mechanism going on. It's terrible, it's bad, but the chronically ill people just fade away. They just die quietly. It's really kind of strange, right? And this is how she explained it. So I'm going to draw it out because she did the finger drawing, but I want you to see the comparison here. So a chronically ill person is on a health decline that's like a staircase. So we're going to treat this bar on the left. This is the health bar. Right? Crap, you can't see it. It's all blown out. Okay. So that's the health bar. And this is the timeline. And so this is chronically ill. So they've been used to suffering over the years. And you start off as healthy. And all of a sudden you hit this active phase of a disease that flares up. And your health drops like this. It's very symptomatic, and you think your body's trying to kill you in 1,000 cuts. And then you recover a bit, but you're never fully healthy again. And you just live with those symptoms for maybe 3 months or something, another 6 months, before you crash again. And I'll just give you an example of what the symptoms are. You may start to feel like your allergies are out of control and everything's really painful, your eyes are really painful, your sinuses swell up, it becomes difficult to sleep at night, you start having night sweats, your sleep hygiene is impossible to maintain because you're just pooling up, you've got pain at night, you've got liver pain at night, and you manage to get through these spasms. Now you've got diarrhea, oh my God. And it's painful running to the bathroom because you've actually got pain while you're having movement in the descending colon. So you're suffering all kinds of pain. And you can go to the emergency room if you want. I've been to the emergency room so many times, but they could never find anything wrong with me. And they were like, don't worry, everything's normal. But now you're like this. And I'm normal. I'm normal. My blood results are normal, everything's normal, but I am 50% healthy now, and I still feel like I'm halfway to death, right? But I've now been suffering with this for years. So now we're 2 years in. And all of a sudden, this is me in November last year, crashing. And now I'm losing weight. I'm losing weight at a rate of 2 to 5 pounds a week. And that's frightening. So here's the disease path of an acutely ill person. So acutely ill person So an acutely ill person, they start off healthy. Maybe there's something wrong, they don't feel like something's right. And all of a sudden, I'm going to say each one of these is 6 months. All of a sudden, you're just crashing. It's this decline, like really sudden. So now we're both at the same point. And this is the point where they decide, are we going to put you in hospice? You got 2 weeks left to live. This person who's acutely ill is extremely symptomatic. They've never experienced these symptoms before. They've been told they're going to die. And the job at the hospice is to make them as comfortable as possible before they die. This person has been told they're going to die, but honestly, they've been feeling like they were going to die 6 months ago, a year ago. It's like no news to us. So we kind of do this. And supposedly the final drop is when you die. But sometimes we get back out. We get back out of hospice. And we survive another bit. And maybe we go back in. We go back into hospice. And maybe this is the end. We don't know. But they could come out of hospice again. And maybe it's the last time. So they could be in hospice a couple of times before they die. But the point is, if you're chronically ill, you're used to feeling like you're going to die. And somehow there's an intuition that kicks in, not fear. You're not afraid of dying because you're used to this symptom. You just know, you're just sort of inside wondering, okay, how much worse is it going to get? Because I can cope with a level of worseness, and I've found methods of dealing with it, and I know what those methods are, and I want to stop this from happening. So this was my path, and that was back in January, December, January. At this point when I made a video of, should I go into hospital? Because I was feeling like if I'm gonna die, I want to die comfortable. And I didn't actually want to be in hospice. I wasn't ready yet. I knew that if I'm gonna die, it wasn't gonna be in 2 weeks, it was gonna be possibly a month, because there was some fight left in me to try and tear up the tumor around my stomach. Because I felt tearing sensation so many times before, I knew that it was possible to tear it up. I just thought, this is going to be painful. So how can I do it in the least painful way possible? So I would weaken the growth by fasting, because I assumed if I'm starving myself, then the cancer cannot live. It's going to get weaker. By definition, it's not able to feed, so it's going to get weaker. And while it's weak, I'm going to go into the jacuzzi and I'm going to baffle this area here on the jacuzzi nozzles and just kind of see if it will start to crumble and break up. And it worked. And that was the start of me actively sloughing off the tumors from my organs. Shortly after that, about 6 weeks after that, the major tumor in my pelvic bowl sloughed off from my left psoas muscle, and that was one of the most indescribable sensations. When it happened, I felt something the size of a tennis ball detach from my left psoas muscle, and there was this nauseating sensation of tearing inside as this tennis ball sized mass peeled its way off of my left psoas muscle boundary. It was very unnerving, quite painful, but not too painful. I've been in a lot more pain. It actually felt like kind of a relief, but immediately after it tore off, there was the seepage sensation of hotness, which I knew was blood. I knew that I was bleeding from my muscle, but it was only like a small amount. The kind of bleeding sensation when you get a really bad bruise that turns black kind of thing, like a hematoma. So I was like, this isn't a gusher, this is a small leaky bruise, kind of like an endometriosis feeling. I imagine that would feel like that. Of instead of having a period that's coming out of your body, it's like having a period that's going into your body, which is kind of gross, but that was the sensation I had with it. And I'm like, guess what? That tumor, the size of a tennis ball, has now detached from its blood supply. So instead of this fear, I was joyous inside because I was like, I did it. I know that I can fight this cancer back with a strategy. This may not be the best way to do it, but I can detach it from its blood supply. I can detach it from its food. I can tear it from my stomach. And I don't want to be rough with myself, because when I'm rough with myself, my organs suffer, and that is painful, and I want to avoid that. So I had to figure out a strategy of doing it in the gentlest way possible. So the gentlest way possible was to relieve the tumoral grip on my muscles, on my organs, by weakening it. And by weakening it, I had to fast, because I had this innate sensation that the tumors are growing in me literally 20 minutes after I eat. There's a sensation of acid, like stomach acid, outside of the stomach. So it was if I have heartburn outside of my stomach. And that's when I realized there's something metabolically going on here. Every time I eat, there's this acid pooling, battery acid burning sensation that's trickling down and pooling into my pelvic bowl. And years ago, when I first experienced this sensation, I was put on antipsychotics. I was labeled delusional, labeled as though I was having a psychotic break, because I described it as being poisoned. I thought I was being poisoned from my hip prosthetic because I didn't know how to describe the sensations. So I found a video on YouTube by Dr. Thomas Seyfried, which I think is really important for anyone suffering with any form of chronic illness, not just cancer, to go and look at. So I will put his name in the summary. So these are two important people to look up on YouTube. I've done the research and I'm doing the work, and I know this works if you can figure out your own strategy. Dr. Thomas Seyfried and hospice nurse Julie. Now, Dr. Thomas Seyfried has made a discovery on a theory that he developed over the years. Cancer is a primitive metabolism based on the fermentation of glucose and glutamine directly in the cell. So you've got these wonky cells that are not metabolizing correctly. A normal human cell metabolizes using a 14-step process. And that 14-step process is like, you take the carbohydrate from the food, and it's like a tree branch, and you give it to the cell, and the cell takes a twig, it ingests the whole branch, and it takes a twig off for itself, and then it passes it to the next cell, and the next cell takes a branch off, and the next cell takes a twig off and a leaf, and it goes around and eventually breaks down, and they share it amongst each other. But with the primitive metabolism, which is in all of us, our DNA is based on a growing snowball of complexity. But the original metabolism of all cellular life is based on this primitive fermentation. Think about cyanobacteria. So bacteria that lived in the ocean without oxygen. They fermented. They just fermented stuff. And they didn't use oxygen, they didn't use carbohydrates, it wasn't available to them. So in a sense, all chronic illness and disease in the body, not just cancer. Dr. Thomas Seyfried talks about cancer metabolism specifically. That's related to cell division that's out of control. But I think my theory is all chronic illnesses is where the metabolics of the cell have kind of just messed up and they've regressed to this very primitive metabolism of just fermenting sugar. That's what glucose is, and that's what glutamine is. It's a form of sugar. And the sugar isn't like sugar that you eat. It's in the form of like tree branch type filaments that have to be broken down into sugars. And the waste product of this fermentation is acid. It's succinic acid and lactic acid. And you know what that feels like. When you've done a major workout and your muscles are burning, you know what lactic acid feels like. So imagine when I watched Thomas Seyfried's video and he said, this is a fermentation process. Cancer is able to extract energy out of your food faster than the 14-step process because it's fermenting stuff. So it's taking food immediately out of your stomach and it's able to metabolize it faster than your human cells are able to metabolize it, which is why when you do a PET scan, they give you a radioactive glucose drink, because the cancer cells are able to suck up that glucose and ferment it straight away in a single process without having to exchange between cells and share different metabolics, methylization, breakdown processes. They don't have to do that. They just ferment. They're just kind of brain dead, unaware cells that are just kind of primitive, underdeveloped. They're underdeveloped, right? So I was like, oh, this is what I'm feeling in my body. Every time I eat, literally 20 minutes after I eat, there's an acid pooling sensation which trickles down my body like heartburn outside my stomach that's kind of seeping down into my pelvic bowl. So something's metabolizing and producing waste acid that's pooling in my belly and burning and burning. Just like you've overdone it at a gym and your muscles are burning and twitching. Well, this is burning in my organs. And I'm like, wait a second, how does the body neutralize acid? It pulls minerals. Think about when you take Tums to get rid of heartburn. So the quickest way of neutralizing acid in the body is to pull minerals out of the bone. And the easiest access point to that is your joints. So now my joints are going to get messed up because the minerals are being pulled out of the bone and they're crystallizing in my joints and they're tearing up my joint tissue. And the acid in my pelvic bowl gets neutralized in the fatty tissue. Think about it. You've got fatty acids in your fatty tissue that are being neutralized by minerals being spun by these messed up cells that are trying to neutralize all this acid. And they are mineralizing my pillows of fatty tissue into pumice stones, which then do all the damage. So this disease grows blindly. Every time you eat, the disease grows. Every time you eat, there's more waste acid which has to be neutralized, and the Rockwool to neutralize the acid gets spun into calcium pyrophosphate. It just kind of mops up all the acid, neutralizes it. And then I end up with a belly full of sea urchins that are scraping up my nerves and scraping up my muscles and causing me disability and causing me pain and causing me inability to ingest my food. So I was like, oh, okay, I figured this out. I know the mechanism now, so I'm going to weaken this and figure out how to peel these tumors away from my organs so that they die and my body can redigest them. So I figured it out. And throughout the month of January, February, and March, I would pretty much go to the jacuzzi every day, and I would target the jacuzzi nozzles during a time when I was mostly in my fasted state. So about 8 hours after eating is when these tumors cannot grow, and they're weak, and they break up quite easily because your body is now looking at the fat reserves and breaking the fat reserves down, which means that if the fat is receding out of these pillow-like tumors, they're going to start revealing the fossilized, spiny, icky, serrated edges of these pumice stones, right? So it's kind of painful. So as my body is digesting the fat away, it's revealing these sharp edges of the tumors, which I've now got the jacuzzi nozzles not directly baffling me, because sometimes that could be too painful, but I'm using the jacuzzi nozzles to jiggle them about and loosen them because they're weak, they're clumpy. And that vibration, I don't know if you know what a bore wave is, a tidal bore. So you get a tide that occurs during the day, twice a day. And if a tide comes in over an estuary, which has a very shallow plain, and a tide comes in, you essentially get the tide moving up the estuary, and this is called a tidal bore. And what happens is the water doesn't mix, and you have this wave front coming in, and it piles up and it crests, and this amplitude of wave front piles up, and it becomes turbulent water like a tsunami. And that's what's happening when you do the jacuzzi baffling, because it's infrasound. And as the infrasound penetrates your organs and reflects, it reflects and refracts, and you've got these wave fronts that are just kind of piling up everywhere. And that big amplitude of shaking makes these mineralized tumors break up. They kind of shake about. Your healthy tissue, which is sinuous and stretchy and has tension in it, and the tension enables the wavefront of the infrasound to travel through it smoothly like a guitar string. So healthy tissue isn't affected by infrasound. Healthy tissue transmits the infrasound, but unhealthy tissue, tumors that are friable, tumors can't stretch. Tumors are not built like muscle. They don't stretch. They're not sinuous. So when you baffle it with infrasound, those sound waves pile up with such amplitude that it literally picks the scab off the tumor. It breaks parts of it up. It makes the tumor bruise, and it starts to lose a bit of blood here and there, and it loses its connection to its supply, like a vampire, from your own body, from your psoas muscle, from your organs. So I did that for 3 months, and over a process of 3 months, I was able to not soften up the tumors, but kind of break them up enough that now they were kind of freely hanging instead of mummified together as a big clump, like a big grapefruit in my belly. They are now broken up. And the broken up is enough for me to start eating larger quantities of food now. So I'm actually able now to eat a full-size meal compared to 2 months ago, where I could literally only eat about half a cup of mushy food at the time, because I just didn't want my stomach to do too much movement because of the tearing pain. It was extremely painful to go through. So the infrasound really helped. It was a gentle sensation that was just aggravating and ablating the external surfaces of the tumors enough to loosen them up and get some movement happening. And then I knew I had to find a more targeted way of smashing down these tumors so that my body could see them and literally start to digest them. And that was the next phase of my fight. I'm pretty convinced now that by the time I have this body scan done, there's not going to be too much large sized tumors. They've kind of all broken up into smaller pieces like this big, like smaller than an egg, that I can now individually target. And that's better because if I can focus on them individually rather than scratching at the surface of a big snowball, I'm actually going to make better progress for each battle with each tumor. So anyway, I've been focusing today on, I wanted to do this little sketch and explain the difference between chronic illness, how it kills you, and acute illness. Like, say a cancer is considered acute because, you know, if you have 6 months left to live, it's just this rapid decline from seemingly healthy to rapid decline. But chronically ill people, each gap can be 6 months to a year, and you're just used to it. You're used to this feeling of dying for so long that you know there's an intuition about how this disease behaves, and you can find the willpower somewhere to kind of push it back a little bit. But that learning curve is not available to someone who's acutely ill because the symptoms just keep getting worse and worse and worse, and there's no break. So I wanted to give people hope that the medical industry, yes, it does feel dismissive. It doesn't recognize your symptoms as like being enough to kill you. But I want to give you validation that you've been on a long journey learning about your body. You know more about your body than the doctors know, right? And there is an opportunity within that insight of the pain that you've been through and the suffering that you've been through to find ways to figure out what this disease weakness is before there is a conjugation of symptoms that you can't handle, that are just not supportive of life. And it is very serious when you are struggling with chronic fatigue. And the way the medical industry and society is set up, like it's just chronic fatigue, it's not going to kill you, is so dismissive. I find it incredibly upsetting now if I see friends who are suffering with chronic fatigue and dismissed. Like, it's a serious condition. And you can't live like that. That's no quality of life. My quality of life right now is still in the toilet. Like I said, I got up this morning at 11 a.m. I was woken up by the case manager calling me, returning my call because I'm like asking her to do this fight for me to get my body scans reapproved that a non-clinician decided to deny because they didn't want to pay for them. Like, I've been paying for health insurance. That's what my doctor asked to have to map the disease. They have no right to deny it. So she's got to push this forward for me. I shouldn't have to fight on top of fighting my illness. I shouldn't have to fight the administration of getting through the medical system on top of looking after my body. So I got up at 11 o'clock, and usually 2 hours after waking up, I usually go through a massive bout of pain where my bowels start to move, stuff starts to descend down my bowels, and that's incredibly painful because now you've got moving guts with a cargo net of mineralized tumors that don't stretch, right? So as the stool moves through the descending colon, it's triggering pain. And I'm like, I have to run to the toilet, but I can't run because I'm kind of leaning over like Trump. I don't know if you've noticed his weird position. He kind of leans forward. That is usually a sign of something wrong with those nerve lines that are connecting around your pudendal nerve. Around here, there's usually some kind of clumping going on that's interfering with nerve control. And like, just speaking from someone who goes through this pain every day, I walk around, sometimes when I'm going through this pain, I walk around with this strange lean towards the front because I am protecting that area from being stretched, because the stretching of any movement, of any stool moving through the bowel, just sets off neuropathic pain in the belly. It's incredibly painful. Like, I'm having labor pains, you know? To go through having a bowel movement is like I'm having labor pains to deliver a poop. And yeah, it messes with your quality of life because you then spend most of your day geared around how am I going to get food in and how am I going to get food out, like get stuff out. That is the focus of my day every day. So the quality of my life is literally in the toilet. It's how am I going to eat and how am I going to poop. And there's different events that can happen that can change it. So the eating thing I went over, I went through a phase of about 3 months where I couldn't eat much except for vegetables and mushy food and soups and things like that. Starting with small handfuls of food, small bowls, and now I can eat a full-size meal. But that means that my stool's gonna change because beforehand it was like, I'm eating baby food, so it's like coming out like diarrhea, which is kind of helpful because if this is all mummified and can't move, it's a way of working around the pain trigger, right? I don't have to deal with the pain trigger if I'm not making my bowels stretch and move around too much. So now I'm eating more, which means I'm going to go through a lot more pain because now there's a lot more bulk trying to move through my tubes. And as it moves through my tubes, there's a lot more stretching happening. And my nerves cannot stretch because they are attached to these tumors, these fatty tissue tumors that are abrading and tearing things all the time. So the downside of eating more means that now going to the bathroom is a lot more painful. I'm literally having labor pains before as it descends down my bowels. And I can't sit on the toilet. That's too painful because I feel like I'm going to turn inside out and prolapse. So I have to time it. And usually, if there has been a lot of abrasion on my tubes as a lot of bulk has passed through, so what happens is you've got nerves wrapped around your colon, your tubes. You've got nerves wrapped around them, and they've all been irritated. They've all been scraped by the tumors, or they're plaqued up and mineralized like pearls, and the stretching causes the pearls to tug and sends like incredible spastic pain into your brain, like it stops you dead from moving. How are those going to break down? How is that going to work? Because they're so mineralized, they're hard now, you know? So it's like I have pearls of pain, literal pearls of pain, because these are no longer tumors. These are like amyloids sitting on my nerve junctions. So after you've been through one bowel movement, there has been some injury to your nerves, and that sets off an inflammatory reaction. So now your descending bowel starts to swell up with fluid from the inflammatory reaction, and that can trigger another bowel movement just from the filling up of the bowel with inflammation, the bowel walls, right? So that usually happens as diarrhea. So now you run to the toilet and it's like spaghetti. Because the bowel walls are so swollen, you're just literally doing spaghetti, like mush in the toilet. And that's kind of a relief, because it's like, okay, I'm cleaned out now. I always prefer having diarrhea rather than a solid poop. It's kind of less painful for some reason. You know, but it's still painful. And so that's chronically ill. My way of life, my normal has changed, where I am literally, my focus of my entire day is getting food in and getting stuff out. And it kind of sucks, because it means that because you have nerve damage, your brain is constantly trying to repair nerves, and it can only do that when you sleep. So your brain is constantly trying to shut you down and send you to sleep with chronic fatigue, and you can't get anything done. I can't get anything done. I can't get my drawing done, my studies done. I mean, I study a lot. That's what I enjoy doing. I enjoy feeling like I'm going to fight this, I'm going to figure out how to fight this, but the windows of being able to have the focus to do it before my brain gets shut down are difficult to find. I have to spend days in advance preparing myself to have a safe window of clarity. Yeah, that's what it is, clarity, because at all other times I'm just a zombie. I've been focused so much on just getting food in and getting stuff out that there is no capacity to focus and think and develop clarity. It's hard. So it usually takes me 3 days of preparation to find a window where I can study and start putting my notes together. So if you're watching this and you find this helpful, then I really would appreciate if you subscribe, and especially subscribe to my Patreon. The address is going to be on my channel profile. If you subscribe to my Patreon, you can subscribe at a free level. And what I'm going to do is transcribe everything that I've been talking about into PDF form, so that I can edit and structuralize into a book format for other people fighting diseases. Because I'm now pretty confident that I've got this and I'm fighting it back. And what else am I going to do? The Western medical system has left me in the dust. They've given me a diagnosis and they've dismissed me, emotionally dismissed me, by saying it's not going to kill you. And we all know that that is an incredibly insensitive thing to say to someone who's chronically ill, because it feels like you're going to die. It feels like you've got a month left to live. Like, how can you go on through all this pain? And they desert you. They desert, because there's no treatment for it. There's no cure for it. So in the end, even after you have fought your way to get a diagnosis, you're on your own. There's no chemo, there's no cure, there's no treatment. And I've done pain management before. They put me on gabapentin, which is pain management for nerve conditions. It just turns you into a zombie. And it's pain management, but it's not actively regressing the cause of the pain, which is these calcium pyrophosphate mineralized tumors abrading on your nerves. So I figured out the mechanism of the disease growth, and I've used that to weaken the disease to give me a chance to actually fight it back. But the process of fighting it back, now that I can see inside my body, now that I have strengthened my nerves and I can smell it and taste it wherever it goes, and I know that sounds weird, but when you've been chronically ill for some time and you start to poke around with your disease, you start to feel it and feel where it hurts. Every time you poke yourself, smack yourself, tweak something, roll something, peel something back, nerves grow in there to see what's going on. New nerves. And people say, oh, you can't heal your nerves. Nerves don't grow very well. They don't. They do. They especially grow when you feel some trigger, repetitive trigger, rhythm. It stimulates the brain to go, what's that? That wasn't an accident. If you have an accident, you fall over and you smack yourself, it's a one-off bruise. The brain goes, okay, go heal it. But if there's a repetition to it, like a dance that you can't do, like I've been doing, dance, repetitive movement, triggers the brain to go, that's important, I need to hold on to that rhythm, and it supports that by developing and strengthening those nerve lines that were used in that repetitive movement. So repetitive movement and rhythm is really important for nerve growth, and that comes back to meridian clapping, which is something I did on a live stream quite recently. In a couple of live streams you see me doing it, where I'm slapping my meridians using different tools. But the brain picks up on the rhythm and it says, oh, okay, that is intentional, that's repetitive, I've got to figure that out and learn it and lay down new nerve lines and strengthen everything and fatten up my nerve trunks so that the synapses don't leak out and lose strength. So your brain rewires the nerves, it hardens the nerves overnight while you sleep. And that's why you have chronic fatigue so bad. Chronic fatigue is just your brain saying, you need to shut down, I need to grow some nerves. And your nerves are all connected to your brain and spinal cord. Naturally, it's going to shut you down. You're going to be chronically fatigued. And that is why I haven't streamed for a few weeks, because I've been working so hard on this nerve development process to fight back the disease. It's left me literally zero energy to speak with any clarity or focus, or just, I don't know how long I've been talking. 83 minutes, 84 minutes of continuous talking. I couldn't do that a week ago, a month ago. Like, forget it. I would do live streams where I was just kind of babbling into the ether to document what I was going through. And now I'm changing tact. I'm changing tact to try and use my newfound windows of clarity and energy to describe the actual mechanics of fighting back the disease. To fight back the disease, you have to know the mechanics of the disease. You have to figure out what the weaknesses of the disease are, and then you can fight it back. But in Western culture, we aren't taught that at all. We're just given a label, and then the can is kicked down the road. This empty can. Like, okay, you've got a label now, bye. You know, or maybe we give you chemo, and the collateral damage of killing everything, including some of the healthy cells, maybe that will kill it. I mean, isn't that just kind of dumb? The doctors are not trained to equip the everyday person how to fight back the disease. It's just kind of dumb to me. So I treat going through this illness as a kind of a gift, that I'm able to have this sight, this insight, this interospection. I call it interospection. It's not introspection. Introspection is where you are thinking about your feelings and emotions. Interospection is your ability to look inwards at your body and what you're feeling inside your body, your sensations inside your body. That's different from your emotional, like, hindsight. So introspection is emotional hindsight. How could you have done things differently? How could you have not triggered that person? Is there something that you could have done to change your behavior? Interospection is all about learning to feel your heart rate, learning to know when your heart rate is raised, learning now that you can feel your heart rate and you can sense it, how can you bring it down just by the power of thought? Wow, that's fascinating. I have the power to do that. What else can I control? Well, you can also control your peristalsis. If peristalsis is giving you pain, that's a sign of depression, because your brain is in survival mode, and in survival mode, you're supposed to be running from the enemy. And you're obviously not going to take a dump in the middle of a run, so your gut gets shut down. And that is depression, right? Your autonomic nervous system starts to shut down. Things like your heart rate are obviously not going to get shut down, but your ability to flip between metabolic states becomes inhibited. You're disabled from using your metabolism to switch into ketosis away from metabolic fermentation is difficult. You have to learn how to train your metabolism to switch quickly. And that takes about 3 months to learn, but you can do it. And the best doctor, I think, to learn about metabolic training, there's a couple I can recommend. Dr. Mindy Peltz on YouTube. She's talking about fasting, and she's particularly helpful for women because she talks about fasting, when not to fast, how to prepare yourself for a fast, what foods to eat after a fast to maintain your body's ability to produce hormones. Your body has to produce hormones in order to kick off certain cycles in the body to heal. And if you're not producing those hormones, there's no point fasting, because you're just malnourishing yourself, right? So you go into a fast, you prepare for it. So follow Dr. Mindy Peltz for this kind of information. There's another doctor that I would recommend for fasting advice as well. He comes from a slightly different angle, and I actually prefer his angle. But he is more integrative with all different kinds of advice. Mindy Peltz focuses specifically on fasting. And it's good to stay focused on that, because it will take around 3 months for you to master fasting if you haven't done it before. Especially if you're chronically ill and chronically fatigued. You've built up an insulin resistance, so even as your blood sugar levels are rising, your blood sugar levels are reducing, so your body needs to break down some of that fat, and it can't, because your body is so clogged up with inflammation. The cells in your body are coated with this glycate protein, which is a sugar-based protein that stops your body from reacting to like insulin. So you've got this problem that you can't lose weight. But losing weight isn't the goal, right? It's actually being able to clean up your metabolism so that your body can react swiftly and go into ketosis when it needs to. And that takes some time to develop. And it took me 3 months. Actually, it took me, I would say it took me about 10 weeks before I really started to feel like I was in control of my metabolism again. Now, metabolism control is not the same as gaining control of chronic fatigue. So chronic fatigue, as I explained earlier, is a direct result to your nerves being injured, and the inflammatory process is also happening in the brain, and the brain needs to shut down, it needs to put you to sleep to repair nerve sheaths specifically, to remyelinate those nerve sheaths. So that's why you get chronically fatigued. It's also compounded by the fact that you've become insulin resistant. So your human cells in your body are so coated with inflammatory glycate that the receptors that receive hormone signals are clogged up. So they are not receiving the hormone signals they need to start the new processes of healing. So you have to clean that out. And the best way of cleaning it out and overcoming insulin resistance, I found, was following Mindy Pelt's videos of actually doing intermittent fasting. And when that failed, so initially I started the intermittent fasting, and I had to build it up gradually because I was so malnourished from the inability to eat that I deferred to foods that were easy to digest. So I went on an almost pure carbohydrate diet, which enabled this disease to rapidly grow. Because sugar was like the only thing that would go through my stomach without it having to masticate all the food up. So minimum movement was like carbohydrates, like potato chips, candy from the machine. That isn't food. It was literally just adding to the glycate coating of my cells that was keeping them blind from reacting to hormone changes in my body. So I had to clean that up, and I couldn't initially fast as much as I wanted to. I was trying to weaken the disease. So I started out by doing 12-hour fasts, and the window of eating was obviously 12 hours, but then I reduced the quantity of food and tried to space it out more than 4 hours at a time, and tried to switch from carbohydrates into lots of vegetables. But then there was a side effect from that. So I developed what's called SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That was extremely painful. So then I went on a carnivore diet just to get through the bacterial overgrowth phase, because there's bacteria that's not supposed to be in there, which was causing all this fermentation and bloating and more pain. So by going on a protein-only diet for a short time, I was able to get that bacterial overgrowth down and controlled. And then I managed to increase my fasting window from 12 hours up to 16 hours, and then 18 hours, and then 20 hours, and now I was at a 20-hour fasting period with a 4-hour eating window. And that 4-hour eating window, I could eat as much as I could eat, which was only small amounts. But now I had to make that food as highly nutritious as possible. I didn't want to be eating carbohydrates, although carbohydrates are needed by the immune system. So I turned to mung bean gruel, which is extremely nutrient dense in terms of plant fibers, and there's enough carbohydrates to supply the immune system as well. So I'll save that for a separate video to talk about the nutrition side of how I actually fought this disease back to a place where I was getting in control of my metabolism. I'll save that for another video, because this video I really wanted to document the validation that you can regress these tumors. I expect by the time I get my body scan in June or July, depending on when the insurance decides to stop overstepping, the tumors will be significantly broken up. And the funny thing is, when I started to feel them break up, initially this thing was the size of a grapefruit plugging up my pelvic bowl, and it was just kind of knitted in with my connective tissue to a point where my poop couldn't get past it. It was like, you know, the wolf spider has this kind of lid on their little den. It was as if the tumor was knitted down into my pelvic bowl like a marble in a bottle, like the old pop bottles with the marble in the top, right? It was like that, but it was like a grapefruit sitting in my pelvis. And the only way I could poop, because this thing was so big and heavy, was to dig it out digitally with my fingers. And that is how I've been living for the last 18 months. I've been unable to go to the toilet. Now my nerves are slowly coming back. I'm slowly regrowing them, but it's extremely painful. So I don't have to digitally pull it out as often, because the nerves are slowly starting to come back. They're kind of twitching, they're weak. They can't fully squeeze and palpate everything. But I'm able to start triggering it, you know, I'm able to kind of give it a little bit of a chew, chew it on its way out kind of thing. But I think it's important to talk about, because I felt dismissed for so long. I went to the doctor 2 years ago complaining that I couldn't go to the bathroom, and I was told, it's normal, there's nothing there. But there was this boggy sensation inside that I couldn't control, and that bogginess was the inflammation swelling up the walls, with, you know, inflammation and acid, and switching off the nerves. So I have some funny stories to tell about that, because I actually love acrobatics and I love doing stunt work. And I had a bass partner. I had a few different bass partners who would stand underneath and lift me up. And they've all kind of faded away from my life as I became ill, because I didn't tell them what was happening. But on the last occasion, a stunt partner invited me to a warm hotel pool, because they didn't like my pool, it was too cold, to train in the warm hotel pool. And he was a bit predatory, and I didn't care, you know. And I just said to him, forewarning, before I go in the pool, I need to dig my bum out before I put a swimming costume on, because I don't want to go into a warm pool and do acrobatics on top of someone and there's an accident waiting to happen. That would just be nasty. So so I'm just doing the you know, polite thing, and I informed him. And he was so horrified, he ghosted me. And that was the end. That was the last opportunity I had to stunt with anyone. And I wasn't ashamed. I'm never ashamed of my body messing up. It's just part of being ill. But he was so incredibly offended and disgusted that in his mind, I was no longer human. I was no longer predatable. I wasn't that hot chick anymore that he could potentially ask on a date, because that was disgusting, right? I just thought it was funny. I was like, I just told someone the truth. This is the way my body is now. It's not working properly anymore, and he was the one that was offended. So I'm not going to take anything personal about it. It just showed me that he was a no good person, and I'm not sad about it either. I'm sad about the fact that I grew out of acrobatics. Look at the paintings here. Look, this is me. These paintings are me. That was me. Let me think. About 12 years ago, doing a scorpion and studying my vertebral alignment, I noticed that I got an extra set of ribs. I was like, dude, I have an extra set of ribs. That's weird. That's me doing my underwater thing. I love underwater swimming. It's really good for my immune system because it massages my lymph. And so that painting, if you go up close to it, it's actually my lymphatic system. So I've studied medicine for decades, literally decades. So when I talk about regressing disease, it's on a background of figuring out a strategy, knowing how the body works, knowing how there are dependencies between the different organs, and knowing how those dependencies can be kind of messed up and interfered with different diseases. And on a cellular level, knowing what that disease mechanism is on a cellular level, and knowing how to fight it back, knowing how to develop a strategy. So that's what I'm doing. And I do these live streams purely because I'm documenting everything that I'm going through. It's difficult for me to write. I used to write a lot. I mean, this is my journaling. This is back when I had a hip replacement and it wasn't doing so well. I was struggling with my hip replacement. I knew there was something wrong with it. And by the way, my university thesis in mechanical engineering, I was a composite engineering student, and I treated the body as a composite material, and I studied the stress transfer through a hip prosthetic, only to end up with this hip prosthetic in my body 27 years later. So this is the studying I used to do about my body, and that's my hip replacement. And this was written, this journal is, let me just get the date on this. I think this is 2017, 8 years ago. Right, so the problem, 8 years ago, I knew there was something wrong with my hip. And I was trying to figure out, I'm going to redesign my hip and have it made in Germany and reimplant it. And that's what I wanted. So this journal article was about the shortfalls of my thesis, my hip revision design back in 2001 when I wrote it. And now I was aware of this hip replacement. So I am now a current wearer of the hip prosthetic that I designed back in 2001. And I have more knowledge about the human body, and therefore mechanics isn't enough. It's not just about mechanics of the body. It's also about the disease mechanisms that cause the failure of the hip prosthetic. And I didn't know that back then, but now I know. So this journal is quite a few years old, and there's all kinds of studies in here, all kinds of weird projects. Just looking through. So yeah, this is me. I'm always studying, and where are we now? Oh, so I did this little sketch here. This one is organ dependency. So you've got meridians in your body that control your organs and your limbs, and every nerve line that passes through from your brain to your legs or your organs is like a nerve highway of data and synapse and force, and they reflect on different parts of the body. They echo at different parts of the body. So if you know the relationship between the different organs and limbs, you know how to strengthen those nerve lines and things. So this was a little sketch here I did to describe to my doctor how I was feeling the development of the disease, which came out of my hip replacement and traveled into my pelvic bowl. It just sort of slumped into my pelvic bowl, and then it traveled up this side of my body, right? So there's my hip, there's my healthy hip, there's my hip replacement, and the easement by easement injury was causing this immune stress to accumulate in the pelvic bowl, which is where the first main tumor formed, like a giant grapefruit that just plugged it all up. So I drew this to illustrate to the doctor where to feel when he palpated me, and he was like, oh, I feel that. Oh, I feel that. And over the 3 months prior to visiting him, I'd been working hard on breaking these tumors down, and the first sensation that I got of actually it working and me breaking the tumor down was when it detached from my left psoas muscle. That's this muscle here. So this muscle here is the psoas muscle. It goes from the spine over the front rim of the pelvic bowl and then attaches to the femur at the lesser trochanter at the back. So this muscle here, the tumor detached, and immediately when I stood up and walked a bit, I felt the weight of a tennis ball dangling on the omentum, which is like the fatty apron that goes over your guts, and this tumor was attached to that. So it had become detached from my psoas, so it was no longer clamping my bowel to my psoas muscle. It had become detached, and it was now hanging freely on the omentum, which meant that I now had this sensation of this heavy weight dangling inside my belly. So I knew at that point, yes, I have detached the tumor. It's freely hanging. It's going to regress. It's going to die back now because my body's going to digest it because it's lost its blood supply. And that was actually true. And over the next 3 weeks, I was in an incredible amount of discomfort as my organs became overloaded trying to digest this tumor, which was now dying. I mean, my organs couldn't cope. So I started to get these extrusions coming out of my skin because my kidneys couldn't get rid of it fast enough. My liver couldn't get rid of it fast enough. So it kind of just started coming out of my skin, and it comes out of my face as well. You get these lesions on the face where I have a tumor in my jaw. You can't really see it. Even if I open my mouth, you might be able to see a bit of it. I don't know. It's too dark there. But anyway, there's a tumor in here, and so it deforms my face a little bit. But luckily it's kind of small at the moment, and I've been working on regressing this tumor. Every time I regress this tumor, the breakdown material has to come out somewhere, and the quickest way out is through the left sinus, and sometimes it comes out of my eyes, like on the waterline, and on the waterline here, these needles of calcium just poke their way out. It feels like needles coming out of my eye. And it also comes out of these lesions on my face around here, and they're quite painful. They're quite sore. It's not like cystic acne, which is what I thought I had for years. It's actually like an inflammatory process where the body's trying to just get rid of material the quickest way, because it's got to travel a long way to get to your spleen to come out. So it's just going to come out through the face. So oh yeah, you can see a couple of little lesions there, and they leak occasionally, and then they become pitted because the immune system is trying to clean the tumor out, so they are digesting parts of it, so they go concave, and yeah, they're not comfortable. But anyway, I know I'm fighting this back. Another thing I wanted to explain just quickly on the same page is energy levels. So how can I describe this? I don't like the word energy levels because like, if you're tired, you can still have a lot of energy. It's different from being fatigued. So in a normal person, your energy levels are based on the circadian cycle, and it's like a wave pattern. It's like a tidal wave pattern, right? So when you're depressed and your body is in survival mode, things start to slow down. Things don't have as much power behind them. It's a lot harder to get things going and to get things squeezing and get things moving. So the wave pattern is, if I was to say, this is a person who is chronically ill, but this is a normal person, right? Let's just say a normal person has energy levels. This is the beginning of the day. And we'll say day 1, day 2, day 3. So a normal person, and I put 3 days because that's the mesocycle of the immune system to heal something, like an injury or something, like a grazed knee. So you usually have your highest energy levels like that. I would say that's a normal person. So night, day, night, day, night, day. Right, okay, you're asleep, and this trough, actually this trough is not negative, it's not 0, it's actually here. I'm going to correct that. The reason why it's here is because at night your body is healing, it's growing, and there's energy levels associated with that for that to take place. Now, when you become chronically ill, this is what happens. Night, day, night, day, night, day. You're barely awake during the day, you're crashing during the day. 3 o'clock you feel like shit, and oh, by the way, 3 a.m. at night you feel like shit. You wake up at 3 a.m. at night because your body doesn't have the energy it needs to process food, so your liver gets clogged up and you end up with liver pain. And that's why you end up 3 a.m. I'm going to say 3 a.m. is the midnight cycle. And this is 3 p.m. during the day, right? Now, how do you get from that up to that? When you're chronically ill and you want to get healthy again, but you can't sleep at night, so you've got this same crap going on at night. So my energy levels now are like this. They're kind of, so if I manage to get up during the day, I have a peak of energy around 11 a.m. and then I crash. And then 3 p.m. and then I crash. And then 8 p.m. and then I crash. And that's me recovering. My energy levels are unpredictable at best. A good day is when I have a shit. Because then I'm like, I've got the energy to get it out myself. But also what comes with that is my energy levels are coming back, but that also means that my pain processing is coming back. So just as my energy levels are getting back, I feel a lot more, which means I feel a lot more pain. So these spikes feel very spiky because the troughs in between are full of pain. I am feeling intense pain when I'm shutting down, when I'm crashing. So to get back to normal, to get back to this smooth tidal wave of energy unencumbered by pain is my next strategy. That's what I have to focus on next, is widening the window of coping, because the more I feel my body, the more pain I'm feeling of like where it's taken over. And until I get rid of these tumors, until I fight everything back, those troughs are going to be significant. They're going to hit the bottom point, because every time my nerves are attacked, every time they get abraded or scraped by a tumor, my brain wants to shut me down because it felt injured, and the brain needs to shut down to heal a nerve injury. So this is what chronic fatigue does to you. It makes your pain feel worse. It makes it more frequent. If you are fighting, it makes it more frequent. And that's why I don't like when people talk about energy levels. It's like, actually, I'm bouncing back a lot harder. But every time I bounce back harder, I fall harder. And I'm talking metaphorically now. So I'm bouncing back with the energy to fight harder, but the fall is a lot more pain. The energy crashing is a lot more pain. So I'm feeling a lot more now. My body is less depressed. So beforehand, it was kind of succumbing itself and surrendering to the disease and just moving within the boundaries of coping and working around and working within that pain tolerance until my peristalsis is hardly happening and everything was kind of squashed down a bit. Now I'm bouncing back and I have the energy to spin and jump and kick. and then it will trigger something and I'll have a harder crash. So I'm a lot more symptomatic now. But it's okay. I have no fear with it at all, because it's all as a result of me fighting back. And that's, I think, important for people to know. When they are chronically ill, you can be very symptomatic, and the symptomatic nature is the sign of your body. It's willpower to fight back. So it's kind of good to know. And that's, I'm going to wrap up now because I feel like I've digressed quite a bit, but I really needed to get some stuff off my chest without interruption, without conversation. I wanted to document this because it's faster than writing. I don't have that energy anymore to be able to write like I used to and study. So I do a lot of I do the drawing when I can. What I'm going to do actually is I'm going to invest in some animation software. I've already got Blender on my computer. I've got some 3D models I need to invest in, and then I can do some animation to actually show the disease mechanisms and how this causes disease to develop and grow in the body. So I'm going to do that at some point when I figure it out. So please do subscribe to my Patreon, even at the free level, because I will just post everything there. And if it's valuable to you and it's helpful, then I appreciate the sort of upgrade to any paid subscription, because I want to make this available to everyone so that they know there is a fallback. The medical system will ignore you. It will leave you in the dust. It will kick the can down the road because they don't know how to fight the disease. And it isn't medications that fight the disease. It's you. So it isn't medications that have helped me to heal. It's me developing my strategy on how to break the tumors down and how to restore my metabolism to the point where it's reactive. It's responsive, not reactive. And I really have this need now that this knowledge is no use to me. I can prove that I've done this. I'm getting Charlie to go through the works with me, and he's doing the work, and he is showing signs of improvement as well. So I just want to share this for everyone.